Hi, this is Miss Afric, and these are the Chapter 3 Day 1 notes. Today we are going to be talking about how to set up a system of linear equations. Remember that a system of linear equations is a set of two or more linear equations in which the solution represents the values that satisfy all equations. In this lesson, we'll be setting up systems in 2 variables and in 3 variables. Let's take a look at one of these application problems. In example number 1 says that your family is planning a 7-day trip to Florida. You estimate that it will cost $275 per day in Tampa and $400 per day in Orlando. Your total budget for the 7 days is $2,300. Set up a system of equations to determine how many days you should spend in each location. Well, based on the question that's asked at the end of this problem, I can immediately tell what my variables will be. And those are the number of days I would spend in Tampa and the number of days that I'll spend in Orlando. So I'm going to let T be the number of days, and I'm just going to use a number sign, the number of days that I spend in Tampa. Then I'm going to use an L to represent the number of days that I spend in Orlando. Now, if we look at the problem, it says that this will be a 7-day trip. That means that the number of days I spend in Tampa plus the number of days I spend in Orlando has to equal 7. So right there I have my first equation. I've got T plus L is equal to 7. Now, for my second equation, let's take a look at the other numbers that they give us in this problem. First, they say that it will cost $275 per day in Tampa and $400 per day in Orlando. Then our total budget for the 7 days is $2,300. So, if I multiply the cost per day in Tampa, which is $275, by the total number of days I spend in Tampa, then I'm going to end up with my total cost for the Tampa part of the trip. And this is also true with the Orlando part of the trip. Adding these together should give me the total cost of the trip, which is $2,300. So my second equation will be 275T, because it's $275 per day in Tampa, plus 400L for the $400 per day in Orlando, and this should equal $2,300. Now I've got my system set up, I have my 2 equations, and I'm all done with this problem. Let's try another example. Keep in mind that in these problems, for now we're just going to be setting them up. We won't be solving them in this lesson, but in the future lessons you're going to learn several different ways to solve these systems. Okay, example number 2. A caterer is planning a party for 64 people. The customer has $150 to spend. A $39 pan of pasta feeds 14 people, and a $12 sandwich tray feeds 6 people. How many pans of pasta and how many sandwich trays should the caterer make? Once again, we're going to set this system of equations up, but we're not going to solve for it. We're just going to set it up. So, right away in this problem, given the question they're asking, we can tell what our variables will be. We've got the number of pans of pasta and the number of sandwich trays. So I'm going to let P be my number of pans of pasta, and I'm going to let S be the number of sandwich trays. For our first equation, let's take a look at just the first thing they mention. It says that the caterer is planning a party for 64 people. That means that you need to have enough pans of pasta plus enough sandwich trays to feed the total 64 people. If you notice in the problem, it says that a pan of pasta feeds 14 people. So if we multiply 14 by however many pans of pasta that we have, that'll give us the total number of people that the pasta will feed. Sandwich tray feeds 6 people. So once again, if we multiply 6 by the total number of sandwich trays we have, which is our variable, right, then we'll get the total number of people that our sandwich trays will feed. And adding these together has to equal our total number of people, which is 64. So our first equation is going to be 14p plus 6s equals 64. So we've got one equation taken care of. Now let's look at the other numbers they give us. It tells us that the customer has $150 to spend. So we know that the total amount they spend on pasta plus the total amount they spend on sandwich trays has to equal $150. It says that a pan of pasta costs $39 and a sandwich tray costs $12. So we can write our second equation as 39p plus 12s is equal to the total money, which is $150. So we have our two equations, and we've set up our system of equations. And once again, we aren't going to solve it today, but you will learn how to solve it very soon. Let's take a look at our third example here, number 3. It says that you are on the prom decorating committee and are in charge of buying balloons. You want to use both latex and mylar balloons. The latex balloons cost 10 cents each, and the mylar balloons cost 50 cents each. You need 125 balloons, and you have $32.50 to spend. How many of each can you buy? So let's set this system up. Once again, given that question, right, how many of each balloon, we know that we've got our two variables, the number of each balloons. So I'm going to let L be the number of latex balloons. And I find it easier to write these equations once I define my variables. So I would always suggest to define your variables first. And I'm going to let M be the number of mylar balloons. So now, the first thing we need to determine is an equation for the number of balloons. It says that I need 125 balloons. So that means the number of latex balloons plus the number of mylar balloons has to equal 125. So my first equation is simply L plus M equals 125. My second equation has to do with the cost of the balloons. So the latex balloons cost 10 cents each, and the mylar balloons cost 50 cents each. And then I have $32.50 to spend. So if I multiply the cost of the latex balloons by the number of latex balloons, 0.10 L, and then add it to the cost of the mylar balloons times the number of balloons, 0.50 M, that needs to equal the total that I have to spend, which is $32.50. And there's our system of equations. Hopefully these are clear to you, because our last example is a little bit trickier, only because we are now working with 3 variables, as you'll see. So let's go through this last example. You have $10,000 to invest. You want to invest the money in a stock mutual fund, a bond mutual fund, and a money market fund. The expected annual returns for these funds are given in the table. You want your investments to obtain an overall return of 8%. A financial planner recommends that you invest the same amount in stocks as in bonds and the money market combined. How much should you invest in each fund? Okay, so I know that this problem is long and looks complicated, but I promise you it's just like the problems we've been doing so far. So right away, let's define our variables. It's asking us how much should you invest in each fund, so I'm going to define my variables as the amount that I invest in each fund. I'm going to let S be the amount I invest in the stock fund. I'm going to let B be the amount I invest in the bond fund. And hopefully you guessed this last one. I'm just going to let M be the amount that I invest in the money market fund. And I'm just going to call that the MM fund. So I've got my three variables. So now I should be able to write three linear equations for them. The first equation I'm going to write, I'm going to take a look at this last sentence they tell us. It says that a financial planner recommends that you invest the same amount in stocks as in bonds and the money market combined. So that means that the amount I invest in stocks should equal the amount I invest in bonds plus the amount I invest in the money market. So there's my first equation. All right, S equals B plus M. First equation done. Moving on to the second equation. It says that I have $10,000 to invest. That means that the total I invest in each of these funds needs to equal $10,000. So there's my second equation. All right, I add each of the amount that I invest up. So S plus B plus M. And that has to equal the total amount that I'm going to invest, which is $10,000. Now for my third equation. Now when they say the expected return of the stock fund is 10%, this means that of the total that you invest in the stock fund, you will earn an additional 10% of that amount, and that will be called your return. So if you want your total investment, like it says in the problem, if you want your total investment to obtain an overall return of 8%, this means that you want the sum of the returns on each of your investments to equal 8% of your total investment. Using the table, we know the expected returns on each investment, so we can set up this third and final equation. Like I said before, the return on the stock mutual fund is 10%. Therefore, of what we invest in the stock fund, our return would be 10% of that. So we can write it as 10%, which we're going to put into decimal form, so 0.10, and 10% of the amount we invest in stock, which is S. So we've got part of our return. Now we just keep going with each of the other investments. So our bond fund has an expected return of 7%. So the return would be 0.07 times B. And then our expected return for the money market fund is 5%. So this would be 0.05 times M. And then when we add all of these returns up, we want it to equal 8% of our total investment. Remember that our total investment was $10,000. So this needs to equal 8%, or 0.08, of $10,000. So 0.08 times 10,000. And that is equal to 8,000, if you want to write it like that. So now we have 1, 2, 3 equations, which matches our 3 variables, so our system is complete. Once again, if you have any questions, I would try going back and rewatching the parts of the video that confused you. After rewatching it, if you still have questions, then just make sure that you ask them during class. Have a great day.